And we are live. Hello, and thank you for joining us here today. Let me give you a quick explanation of who I am and what we're about to do. So, my name is Jason, and I work in a software development company that provides software services, software development to other startup companies. And I would describe myself as a connector between these companies and the expertise of our company, CoApp. And it's because of this role that I have been able to meet many different CEOs, top performers, really just innovative, creative people. And what we try to do here on this podcast is we try and draw out the habits, tools, techniques, routines that have led up to our guests' success. And our goal over here is to provide our listeners, both people in the top management and also employees, young guys like me, young people. Uh, we provide them with basically valuable practical information that they can use in their life in order to become the best top of achievers and in order to achieve their goals. And on the show today, we have Alan. And what was interesting about Alan was I was in a networking event with Alan online on Zoom. And I noticed that, Alan, the way that you did your 1 minute pitch was very different to how I did it and how everybody else did it. And it was so well articulated and it was so to the point, and every single word was there on purpose. And it really just caught my attention. And so when we had a breakout room in on Zoom, I had to ask you about that. And it turns out that you have 20 years of training in networking. And so I thought that this would be a very good and very practical podcast where we could explore the idea of networking in order to give our listeners very valuable information about that. So let's just dive into it. And I should say, thank you firstly for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it is. It's a real honor. And I know that we're going to go into some really interesting stuff over here. So firstly, why is networking important? You know,
Well, networking is about connection, and you're never going to get anywhere in life if you don't make connections, unless you happen to be a very, very rich miser sitting in a castle somewhere, but most of us are not. And therefore, to make our way in the world, in whatever, whether we're talking about business life, whether we're talking about social life, you need to network. Because don't think networking is only about business. Your friends are a network. Your family are a network. Your friends you used to have way back are a network. In Israel, the army is a network, and you could go on. The school gates is a network. And to be successful, you have to be prepared to network through all these. Everybody has a. Do you know that everybody knows 1,000 people?
wow.
You just think about it. You think it's ridiculous. Just sit down and start adding up the people you were at school with, the people you were at university with, the people you did army with, the people you've worked with, your family, your interest groups. You all. I don't mean you know 1,000 people who you'd go away on holiday with, or 1,000 people you'd have dinner with, but you know 1,000 people. I probably got more than that on my phone. Uh, I've got so many people on my LinkedIn group, but I don't know who half of them are. But that's another story.
So let's jump into how did you become a master at networking, and later on we'll get into a little bit about the structure of how to introduce yourself in a networking event. But let's go
Yeah.
back.
How did I get involved? Well, I got to a stage in my business. I was in the public relations and writing, copywriting, which I still am, and not so much in public relations, but in copywriting. And I got to a stage where I needed to business had stopped coming in. Well, I was fortunate when I started that I started in the late 80s and the boom was still going on. And in fact, I was very fortunate that a friend of mine did training for accountants, and he let me piggyback on his one of his mail shots. And I sent out my mail shop to about 1,000 people, and business was coming in by every post. It was incredible. Then came uh, the recession of the late 80s and early 90s, which knocked us back. In fact, in London, I don't know where else, in London, in Britain, it knocked back PR firms, it knocked back printers, it knocked back designers, and so forth. Because remember, at that stage, the internet wasn't a thing that people were into. That came a few years later. And so when I had an invitation, I had an invitation once to join a network organization, and I went along. I thought, no, it's not for me. Then a year later, I tried again, and I took to it like a duck to water. So much so that within 6 months, I was on the leadership team, and within the next 6 months, I was the president of the local chapter. And my boss, as he was to be, came along, liked the way I was running the meeting, and invited me to become a director to start other groups. So I learned not only to be a networker, but to teach other people networking. And it certainly changed my life. And I also, at one stage, I spent lots of time with this organization, well known as BNI. I spent a lot of time with them in England, 10 years, where I was number 2 in northwest London. And then I was worked with them in Israel as well. And then I found I was getting a bit old for driving out to meetings at 6:30 in the morning. But now, in a sense, the coronavirus has done me a favor because everything is virtual, and I only have to walk from my bedroom to the computer next door.
I love that. The game of networking has changed, and you can just network and connect with people like we have. We've never actually met.
Because 20 years ago, we've forgotten how fast progress has happened. We didn't have, I remember my kids saying to me, "Dad, you really must get email." I mean, can you imagine that? When we started our business, I started my business in 1987. I didn't even have a fax machine. We went to the fax bureau around the corner. I mean, nothing is as remote as the recent past. So that's how times. And I mean, I suppose that was probably when you were still a glint in your father's eye, Jason.
Right, and that's why it's so important to really understand networking. As I'm 28, as a young person, really just starting out on my career. This is why these conversations are so valuable. Let's go back to that fundamental aspect of networking. What would you say, since you have all of this experience and you've actually, as you said, become you were part of a networking group, and you, in 6 months, as you said, you became like a director of these, and you were teaching networking. What is the fundamental principles of networking?
I think it is connect with other people, and remember, there's so many basic rules, but I give you one basic rule to remember. Some people are quite nervous and shy. Nothing wrong with that. And I would say I was like that, believe it or not. I may sound very confident and even aggressive now, but I 20 years ago, before I started networking, if I went into, say, a business meeting, or say a seminar, or I joined a course, you'd see other people standing around chatting, and I probably would be looking at the notice board and wishing that the floor would open up and swallow me up, because I didn't know what to say. And then I learned one really important truth. If you're in that situation, let's imagine I meet you for the first time, and I say, "Hi, Jason, I'm Alan." You are as pleased that I've spoken to you as I am that you're speaking to me. So never forget that other people have got the same worries and concerns and fears as you have. And so networking is basically reaching out. It's opening yourself up to potential allies, friends. That's how they start. If you think you can walk into a room and, right, I'm going to sell to all of you, and then I'm going to say my goodbyes and go on to someone else. That's not a networker, that's a shark. That's a hunter. A good networker is not a hunter. A good networker is a farmer. a good network sees that he plants the seeds and they grow. It may take, you may be lucky and that you make immediate contact. And I was very lucky, if I may say, to have met you, because I think we've got a very good rapport. But it doesn't always happen. But you know, if at first, and the fault, if you don't make the right connections, maybe you're not doing the right things. So don't blame other people. Look at yourself.
That's beautiful, and I think one of the reasons we have a rapport is I try to seek out, especially being on in the beginning of my career, is I try to seek out guidance and knowledge and wisdom from other people, and that's really going back to why I started this podcast. Because I get to meet interesting people because of my job, and really they have so many tips and tools to give, and that's such a fundamental mindset that you said that I go into a room and instead of me thinking to myself, uh, who am I going to sell to? And then just leaving. It's more about, as you said, creating a rapport, creating a connection between an
Listen,
individual.
if you go to any networking meeting, whether it's real or virtual, if you ask anybody who's here come to get business, they'd all put their hands up. If you ask them who's here to give business, that's another question. And that's why in my organization I belong to all those 17 years, BNI had the motto, give us gain.
Yeah.
And it should be everybody's motto. If I'm happy to give of my time or my knowledge because you're doing the same to me and I'm gaining from it. You see, this is the point. And you have to be prepared to give before you get back. And another, so there are many illustrations of how this principle works. And for example, that I then may have to think about what are you, rather than thinking about I'm walking around, what are my needs? I can think, what are Jason's needs, or what are Chaim's needs, or what are Mary's needs, or whoever. Now, a minute. I give you an example. A friend of mine who was a very good networker. He had an afternoon to spare, and he knew that his colleague in the group, who was a printer, was looking to find business with universities. So he spent his time ringing up all the universities and colleges in London, and his line would be, "Look, I'm just. Can I speak to the person who buys the printing in your organisation?" He gets put through. He said, "Look, you don't know me. My name is so and so, and I'm not calling for myself. I have a colleague who really wants to be introduced to people from universities who buy printing. He'd like to have a chance to talk to you." And after 2 or 3, somebody said to him, "You know, we actually haven't got any, we don't really want to extend our list, but I'm so impressed with the fact that you are spending your time working for somebody else and you're getting anything from it other than helping a friend out. I want to put your person into it, and that's how it works." So the whole principle of networking, positive networking, is that you don't go in it, what's in it for me? It's what's in it for everybody. Because if one gains, we all gain.
That's so beautiful. And you remind me of a story. And basically, what you're saying is it's important to look at other people and see where you can provide value first. And I'll tell you a story that happened to me recently. We, in our software development company, we had 2 clients whom their business, what they needed was too small. Like it wasn't really our expertise. And instead of saying, okay, well, we can't help you, goodbye, I said, no, I will contact some individual, like people that do software development freelance. And I ended up contacting the most wonderful guy, and we had an hour-long conversation. And he happens to live in Tel Aviv, and he gave me so much valuable advice, and I was able to give these clients over to him. And I made a friend in the industry that really gave me some insight. And it was because I was like leading with how can I provide with the value for these people. And so I'm definitely going to keep that in mind when I go into networking, this idea of, as you said, giving first before expecting back.
I'll tell you a story about my grandfather. My grandfather used to keep a menswear shop in the East End of London. And one day somebody came into his shop and wanted a button for his waistcoat. And he looked in his buttons, he couldn't find the right one. And he looked down at his own waistcoat, and they were the identical ones. So he cut the button off his own waistcoat and gave it to the customer. He said, "Have that, my friend. I want you to have it." And he said, "Right, that's so kind of you. I've got an awful lot of work I need done, and I'm bringing it into your shop tomorrow." That is the attitude, though. You're helping somebody else, you know.
What are some other things? What are some mindsets and some other tips and tools that an individual can have when they are going into networking?
Okay, let's look at the meeting. You've got to, if you are successful, if you work at your networking, you've got to realize that the group you belong to is your best customer. There's probably, you will get more business when you work at it from that group than you will from any one other individual. So how would you treat your best customer? Would you ever be late for a meeting with your best customer? Would you ever miss a meeting with your best customer? Would you sit and play with your phone in a meeting with your best customer? If your best customer said, "Oh, I'm really looking for this," would you not make a note of what he's looking for? So that's the first thing. Treat the meeting as if you're having a meeting with your best customer, because you probably are. The second thing is, and I know this is Israel where we're very informal, I don't dress appropriately. I'm not saying you should wear a suit and a waistcoat, but at least look smart, look clean, don't look as if you've just fallen out of bed. Third, particularly in the era of speaking on the screen rather than the, speak clearly, don't rush, especially if you're speaking in a second language, whatever that may be. It may be that, you know, you have to make sure if people don't understand you, they're going to switch off. And that will be the first thing. Be there on time, or I know you can go mad trying to get into Zoom meetings sometimes, but so allow yourself a little more time. I learned that lesson because we had our first conversation. So allow yourself time, be ready, be prepared, have your notes ready if you need them, have your pen and your biro and whatever, and your notebook. Be ready and prepare what you're going to say. Well, I suppose you'd like to go on to talk about that now.
It's going to, so in general networking, the structure of networking, when you join a networking group, as I understand from my experience, which is very limited, it's only been a couple of months, you get 1 minute each, and you're supposed to introduce yourself and say what it is you do and what you're looking for. And now you have a very interesting structure to that 1 minute introduction, and perhaps we could break that down for our listeners. You can first go into your suggestions if you want. That'll be great.
Okay, well, nearly all the networking groups I know do have this 1 minute thing. They also have longer speeches, and we can talk about that perhaps on another time. But let's talk about the 1 minute. Now, imagine you're doing a radio commercial. What's one thing that is consistent about a radio commercial? If it's a minute, they mean a minute. They don't mean 59 seconds. They don't mean 1 minute, 1 second. It's 1 minute. So you need to have a discipline about it. Secondly, you need preparation. Somebody like me who's been doing this for 20 years and more probably can stand up there and probably do it off the hoof. He shouldn't, but he could. Anyone who is starting from scratch or even just beginning shouldn't. I told Jason this joke, and it's true, but there's a young man with a violin case walking out Broadway. And he comes up to an old man and says, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me the way to Carnegie Hall?" And the old man looks at him and says, "Practice, my boy, plenty of practice." And that is true for most things in life, but it's certainly true for networking. And it's certainly true for when you're giving a presentation. I was told about a guy in the early days of the organization who was very nervous and worried about giving a presentation. So he wrote it out, and he talked to himself in front of the mirror, and then he did it in front of the dog, and then he did it in front of the cat, and then he did it in front of his wife, and then eventually he had the courage to go and do it in front of the group. If it's important, just think, if you can manage to draw attention to yourself and people pick you out because you out of the against the competition, they're listening to you, wouldn't it be worth some of your time just to get their attention? It must make sense. So here's a very, very simple way of making sure that you are always introducing yourself effectively. Now, first of all, how are you going to introduce yourself? Suppose you said, my name is Billy Brown, and I'm an underwater network needlework consultant.
Underwater needlework consultant.
An underwater needlework consultant.
Okay.
Now, that would mean very little to most people. Possibly it means something to you. But if you had then explained, rather than giving the title of your job, you explain the benefits in a few well-chosen words, mostly verbs, that makes a hell of a difference. So let's take a normal, forgive me, a boring occupation, an accountant. We all know accountants. Some of my best friends are accountants, but at heart, they have to be boring. It's taught to them in college. If you say, either in a presentation or in a party, what do you do? I'm an accountant. Oh, do you? Next topic, move on. If you say, every day I save people thousands and thousands of shekalim. God, how do you do that? Now, you want to have an introduction that makes people say or think, how do you do that? So dentists might say, I save people's mouths from rotting up. An estate agent might say, I make sure that people live happily ever after. You can go on and whatever you do, you can adapt that. So the first thing is, in your 60 seconds, your first 10 seconds are how you introduce yourself in Technicolor. So people aren't saying, they're saying or thinking, how do you do that? That's the first 10 seconds. And that always stays the same. So people know that you're coming, rather like the noise that your favorite radio station makes. I don't listen to the radio. They're very, you switch on certain stations and you hear the theme buzz or tune or whatever, and that's it. You want them to get up onto your wavelength. That's your first 10 seconds. Then let me go to the last 10 seconds. The last 10 seconds is your memory hook. Now, your memory hook is something people can, again, remember you by. And again, I'll tell you a story about this. A guy I know way back in England who was a printer. And he used to come to the meetings wearing a jacket, a shirt, and a tie. But his ties were extraordinary. They were colored. Some had little strings and bows and things coming out of them and so forth. And his catchline, his memory hook was, I'm the creative guy with the creative tie. And everyone knew that. In fact, someone came to one meeting and they wanted to get hold of him. So, excuse me, they rang up the head office. Do you know one of your members? He's the creative guy with the creative tie. Oh, yeah, we know who he is. So find a way in which you can have a memory hook, because that was when the meeting's gone. You see, you may all be concentrating while you're in the hour or the hour and a half of the meeting, wherever long it may be. But then you go home or you go back to your office, or even if it's only closing down the meeting and starting something else, your mind is another thing. It's on your clients, it's on the bills you've got to pay, it's on the jobs you've got to do that day, and you forget. The memory hook is a way of keeping you in their minds. So you have the anchors, the twin anchors of your 1 minute. your introduction in Technicolor at the start, 10 seconds, and your memory hook at the end. And you need to start working on that. In between, there are 2 other segments of 20 seconds each.
Mm-hmm.
The first segment can vary slightly. It can be telling a story about how you've succeeded. I want to tell you about a client that I've been working with for the past year, and we have had such success in moving their products through clever marketing and through finding the right targets. So that can take about 20 seconds, and then you go from there. So therefore, I'm looking to meet somebody. I'm looking to meet somebody who works in the following industry, because I can do the same for them. So that segment 2, the story, 20 seconds. Facts tell, stories sell. Facts tell, stories sell. And then when you come to the next 20 seconds, you must be specific in what you're asking for. If you can name a company, if you can name even an individual, could be even better. Because that, I used to be, one time I was a teacher of English literature and language. And you'd have kids writing, I don't know if they still write essays, I don't know if they write at all in these days, but this was way back in the Stone Ages. And you give them, if you gave them a list of topics or stories that you want them to do, they'd say, right, they get on with it like that. If you said, oh, write about anything you like, I can't think of anything to write about, sir. Now, we're only dealing with grown-up children here, and they're the same way. Be specific. Give them something that they can really chew on. Like, for example, let's suppose you want to do business with motor dealers. And you say, I want to know who can introduce me to the director of Ford in Netanya. Now, Tom said, oh, I don't know Ford. How about the director of Kia in Netanya? Would that be any good? Of course it would be any good. But the fact is, if you just said, I want to deal with some motor dealers, you focus the mind as much as possible. It can be that the actual person will be known. You never know. You never know who everybody knows. As I said before, everybody knows 1,000 people. Just start working it out. People you were at school with, people you were at uni with, people you were in the army with, your family, your friends, your social group, people you played football with on Thursday evenings. There's no end to it. 1,000 people. You probably know even more once you started writing them out. I've probably got more than that on my phone, and I dare say many of you have as well. Never underestimate the value of anybody as a potential link in your networking. So Jason's a very, very simple package for your 1 minute. It needs working on, and we can offer you free of charge. So those that are interested in coming on my contact list, and I'll give you the details later, I will give you a illustrated PowerPoint presentation on how to make effective 1 minute. Got to adapt it. It'll take may take a week or so to arrive, but you will get it. So this is a promise. Follow up, and I will arrange that for you.
So when we do that, you're offering a PowerPoint presentation.
A PowerPoint presentation, and I'm also offering, if you want to speak to me further about how to make things effectively, how to network effectively, I'm there, and there's no charge for this service.
That's amazing. Thank you just for agreeing to reach out to our listeners in that way and providing free value. And just to go back to it, so I'm understanding, the first 10 seconds are the catching them. How are you going to do that? Then the next.
No, the first 10 seconds are introducing yourself in Technicolor. Now, bearing in mind that you are not selling a product, you are selling yourself. When
Selling.
you're going to this meeting now, you're on a Zoom screen of 20 people. Some people have managed, like you have, Jason, to put your name on the bottom. I didn't do it this time. I did it when I was in the meeting. They don't even put the title of what they do. But there are 20 people most of whom you've never seen before. How are you going to be memorable to them? You've got to stick out a mile. You've got to be distinctive, without being offensive, without being the party bore, without being obstreperous, just by having an appealing personality. That is the really important thing. So that's why you introduce yourself in Technicolor, explaining by your name, the benefit and the brief benefit of what you do. My name is Fred Bloggs. I save people thousands of shekalim each year, etc., etc. That kind of benefit. Okay, that is why I want to tell you about how I helped so and so, or how I could help somebody else, or whatever it may be. That's the story. Go into a story, go into some kind of illustration of the work that you do. That's number two. Number three is your specific referral request. And number four is your memory, your name again, and your memory book. That is your package. And you work on it and you practice it, and you should take exactly 1 minute.
So
your watch is your friend. Your watch is your friend, rather than your phone, because your phone could distract you. But you could use a phone, but get the timing right and practice. And I say practice and practice and practice, but don't fall into the danger of doing the same thing every week. Because the first week they may be impressed. The second week may act as a stimulus. The third week they'll say, oh, this is a bit of a bore, isn't it? And they'll switch off. Again, another story from the past. When the British organization was about in its infancy, somebody came over from Arizona, all the way to London from Arizona. I think he was a financial consultant. And he did a brilliant 1 minute presentation. He put on a white coat and a stethoscope. So I'm listening out for your financial problems. And this guy had been in the organization, it started in America, I think 5 years. So they were very keen afterwards to find out what was his secret and how often this must have done this so often. And they said, you must have been very, very used to doing this presentation. You must have done it so many times. And he said, do you think I would insult my fellow members by doing the same thing twice? So what I say to you, my friends out there, if you're involved in networking regularly, cut your business up into 6. Maybe there's 6 isn't enough, but 6 is a nice round number. And each week or each fortnight, you're going to talk about one aspect of that business. Now, if you're a florist, you might say, well, do I do deliveries? Do I do specials for Valentine's Day or for people's birthdays? Do I do functions like weddings and bar mitzvahs? You could go on, and you can apply this to any business, whether it's software, whether it's dentistry, whether it's being a cab driver, everything you can split into 6. And so you tell a story or you find a presentation linked to one of those 6 things. And when you finish the 6, you start again, but with a different aspect to it. So you're always fresh, but you're renewing about your business, and you keep the interest of your listeners.
So the first 10 seconds is that sort of technicolored entry, and the last 10 seconds
absolutely absolutely
is the memory hook, and those two stay the same, but the 40 seconds in between, the 20 seconds
think of it as a picture frame. Think of it as you're going into a gallery, or you're looking at someone's walls. You've got loads of photographs, and the frames are all the same. The frame is all the same. It may be gilt, it may be copper, whatever, it may be modern, doesn't matter, but the frames are all the same. But the middle changes. And that's the point.
And again,
now obviously,
it
doesn't matter if you go a second over in between the 2 middle sections, but basically try and keep a discipline. So you know when you get, and don't leave yourself too much to do in the last time. You've got to work at it.
And the two 20-second middle sections, the first one is a story about how you succeeded with a client, how you helped a
How
client.
you succeeded. It can be how you succeeded, how you work. It can be all kinds of things. The way you work. I'm very good at that, and that I can offer particular things because of my experience with so and so. If you're a travel agent, for example, you'd say, well, I've lived extensively in South Africa. I know all the hotels in Cape Town. So come to me because I can give you a far better analysis. There you go on there. But I'm looking for people who are planning a South African holiday next year.
And
again, you're linking this part 2 with part 3. So when you're specifically proposed, and if you can be more specific, I'm looking for people who are forming a group from this synagogue or a group from this ladies' set, whatever it may be. You've got to keep. You have to keep at it, but try and be as specific as possible in what you're asking for.
That's the first 10 is the technicolored introduction. The next 20 is the success story, how you helped a client. The next 20 is a referral, specific referral, as you said, be specific. And then the last 10 is the memory hook, the catchphrase. I'm Jason and I help businesses succeed in
No, that's the first part, Jason.
Okay.
The memory hook is different. Like my memory hook as a copywriter is I use words to build your reputations.
Can you do you want to do your 1 minute for us?
Okay, I'll probably fall. I shall probably fall flat on my face. Now doing it in front of the camera. Just a quick sip of water. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alan Gold, and I am your wordsmith. Now, the same way as that a blacksmith forges shoes to fit a horse's hoof, I use words to make them when they're needed in the right place in the right time. Now, did you know that more people speak English than any other language in the world? In fact, there are more English speakers in China than there are people in Europe. And that means that English is really essential to your business needs. That's why what I'm looking for today, I want to be introduced to Israeli entrepreneurs in the pharmaceutical business who are looking to get into the United States market, because I've had experience of working in this market with 2 leading people, and I can help you get the right words in your proposal so you really look at the business. So that's Alan Gold. I use words to build your reputations.
Beautiful. And I think that's
I was breaking the rules. I wasn't looking at my watch. So I think I probably was a bit quick, but I got I hadn't, and I was a little bit off the hook. But that gives you an idea of how you can do it.
That's really beautiful. And I think that's a really great way to wrap up this episode, because I don't want it to go too long. We focus on providing as much value in the shortest amount of time. And just to sum up over here, I really appreciate it. I'm gonna get that PowerPoint from you so that listeners can have even extra value. And I'll where can people find you, Alan? Where can people come to your website, or how do you like to be contacted?
Well, I don't have a website, but I am on. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. But my email is alan@24caratcopy.com. That's Alan at 24 caratcopy.com, and all emails will be answered as quickly as possible.
Perfect. We'll have that in the description. And thank you so much for coming on here and explaining the importance of networking and some paradigms and mind shifts that we should have, and also just explaining some practical tools that we can use. And finally, just how important it is to nail that 1 minute. Thank you so much, Alan. And if you are listening to this, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This podcast is, again, trying to provide as much value to our listeners using connections that I have been fortunate to foster and make here in the world, mainly of high tech. If you have any comments about networking, maybe some tips about networking, please write them in the comments below. I would love for there to be even more tips, more valuable information about how people can network. Alan, it's been such a pleasure once again chatting to you, and thank you to our dearest listeners for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.